Well, folks, we are going to be talking about that Nintendo Direct that's playing behind me. And actually, in particular, we're going to be talking about how I actually feel very, very different than it seems much of the internet does about the state of Nintendo Switch 2 right now. And it's not that I have no criticisms of the Direct, right? There's two particular things that I think kind of suck about the Direct, or at least are uncomfortable or maybe even just disappointing. One of those, well, where's the game that is supposed to blow people's minds? And I don't mean blow people's minds in terms of, hey, I'm really excited this game is coming, but I mean a sort of visual showcase game that kind of says, hey, this is why Switch 2 exists, right? I am actually going to get into a little later in the video what I think is going on with that, but that doesn't mean there wasn't a bunch of exciting stuff. I'm a little disappointed because I feel like that would have changed the narrative of much of the internet. It doesn't have to be 3D Mario, to be clear. It could have been really any game coming from Nintendo that just visually appears to be something that we could not have gotten on Switch 1. The other thing I'm disappointed in is stuff like DLC being announced for Legends EA before the game's even out. I always hate when that happens. It is not something that I've ever enjoyed. I know it's very, very, very common in the industry. Sometimes you get the DLC sold to you in a digital deluxe edition. Sometimes there's day one DLC, like literally, factually known to be cut content sold to you on day one. Yeah, I hate that stuff. And I know this is very common in the industry, and it's right now with Nintendo just, at least as far as we know, happening with Pokemon, but it's whatever. All right, there's another third-party game that actually said the same thing, but overall, I really love the Direct, and I love where Switch 2 is today, and I'm only even more excited about where Switch 2 is going to be in the upcoming year or two. Now, the problem is, of course, because of those two things, I think a lot of people are viewing this Direct in a very different way. And I understand why that's the case. In fact, I understand anytime people are overly negative about a Direct or any presentation, be it a State of Play, an Xbox Direct, Ubisoft Forward, or whatever, because if you don't get exactly the games you want, it usually ends up being a disappointment for many. Now, I know personally I have just enjoyed a wide breadth of games and genres and franchises, so to me, it's very easy to please me. I don't have to get exactly what I expect because I enjoy so much. I just have to get things that look good, things I want to buy. And gosh, there's like 10 to 15 games coming out of this Direct. I am like 98% confident I am buying. But we have to talk about the Direct. Maybe one other negative that wasn't part of the Direct, but is in the aftermath of the Direct. And just give you my thoughts on why I think Nintendo Switch 2 is actually in a great position. Now, before I do, I want to remind you that we are giving away 5 copies of Kirby Air Riders that, yeah, it's getting yet another Direct. If you would like to get a chance to win, all you got to do is go down to the link in the pinned comment or the description. I do wish everyone luck. And let's dive in because the Switch 2 is in a very good position. Obviously, we know it was the fastest selling, and I'm saying was because we don't know where it is right now. But as of the last financial meeting, it was the fastest selling system of all time, faster than anything before it. Now, we don't know where sales are now, and as we get deeper into the second full quarter of the system coming out, and we get an eventual quarterly update, maybe it's no longer the fastest selling system of all time. I don't know. Nintendo is certainly not projecting it to be the fastest selling of all time this fiscal year because they're only projecting 15 million sales for this fiscal year, which is actually an incredible start for basically a system that's on the market for only 10 months of the fiscal year. So it actually is still a really good start, but I understand that it's probably not going to maintain that fastest selling all throughout, unless something crazy happens this holiday. Like maybe the end of this next quarter, it loses the fastest selling moniker, but then after the holidays, it gets back to it. That is possible. Maybe the Legend ZA bundle blows up much bigger than I'm anticipating. Maybe Age of Imprisonment actually ends up being a massive system seller. Maybe things like Dragon Quest 1+2 HD massively boost sales of Switch 2 in Japan because it's massive there, the Dragon Quest franchises. Maybe there's other things happening, like maybe Kirby Air Riders ends up being a system seller. It's hard for me to imagine a Kirby game doing that, especially a spin-off, but look, it's getting 2 major directs, so Sakurai and Nintendo are at least trying to make it something like that. Maybe Metroid Prime 4. Maybe that's the big one. I know it's on Switch 1, but maybe it becomes this gotta have it experience, and you gotta play it with mouse mode and 120 FPS, so you gotta get a Switch 2. I have no idea. Those are obviously like best case scenarios, and no, that's not gonna happen for every single one of these games. 1 or maybe 2 or maybe all of them. Well, I don't think ZA, but all of them, the rest, could potentially flop. Whatever that means for Nintendo. I don't obviously know what their internal sales projections are for the actual software on the individual level. We only know their projections for overall software sales and obviously overall system sales. Now, I actually think we're in a good position. Now, I expected 3D Mario in this direct, and I expected it, well, because it's been a long time since we've had one, and I thought even if it was a late next year game with the anniversary, maybe you could tease it. In hindsight, maybe I was being a bit too hopeful. When you think about the team that makes 3D Mario, EPD1, that team has only ever made 3D Mario dating back to Mario Galaxy, until Bonanza came out. If you think about their progress, they weren't doing absolutely nothing since 2017. After 2017, they ended up making Bowser's Fury, right? After Bowser's Fury, they made Donkey Kong Bonanza. And if Donkey Kong Bonanza was still in active development this year, or even late last year, then that would probably mean the full team hasn't really been working on 3D Mario really until this year. And if that's the case, 3D Mario is probably still another couple years, if not longer, away. This team does tend to take about 3 to 4 years to make a game. So if you follow that cycle, 2027 could be when 3D Mario is coming, hence why it wasn't announced as part of the 40th anniversary, because it's not actually coming out anytime soon. That also sets up a direct a year from now to potentially be the reveal for 3D Mario for 2027. So yeah, we got to consider that. That is possible. I don't know. We don't know all the development secrets behind the scenes, but Donkey Kong Bonanza is a Game of the Year contender. It just got some DLC. It is of the scope of Mario Odyssey. I would argue in some cases slightly better, but in other cases slightly worse. But definitely took the full might, and we've seen the end credits of the actual 3D Mario team. This was not a side project by a smaller sector of the team. This took almost the full breadth of the team to actually get to completion. So when you consider that, you know what? Yeah, maybe 3D Mario, maybe expecting it right now, was more hopium than it was reality if you thought about things through a logical process. But even without 3D Mario, there are so many things I love about this direct. Dragon Quest VII reimagined, right? Oh my gosh, a brand new Fire Emblem game. Are you kidding me? The new Yoshi game looks incredible, at least from an art direction. We'll see. I'm always 50-50 on the modern Yoshi games, if I like them or if I'm just kind of So we'll see if this is the one I'm going to like or if this is just going to be another nothing's really been as good as since the OG Yoshi's Island days, to be honest, in my book. But I can still find some good fun in them, especially if there's multiplayer and I can play it with my kids. Other things, though, I think are interesting. Mario Tennis Fever, right? This game, I don't know how to really describe it other than it looks like the most exciting Mario Tennis game since maybe like the Game Boy Color to me. It looks incredible. The gameplay looks incredible. It looks silky smooth. Looks like, to me, I know they were streaming in 4K. Looks like it's probably a 4K game, whether it's using DLSS or it's true 4K. I don't know, but it does look really, really good. I'm loving the rackets. I'm loving pretty much everything about it. And this is what I could really say about the whole Direct. There wasn't a whole lot shown in the Direct besides maybe some of the smaller indie titles that didn't excite me. I mean, even getting Resident Evil Requiem. Yeah, it doesn't look as good as the PS5 version. Duh. The Switch 2 is not a PS5. The PS5 is like 3 times more powerful just from a GPU perspective than the dang Switch 2, let alone that it's got a much better CPU, and you plug it into a wall and it runs at 200 to 240 watts. Like, you know, we're talking about comparing that to a Nintendo Switch 2 that runs at 15 watts in handheld and 25 in dot mode. Like, yeah, of course it's more powerful. And being more powerful, the game's going to look better there. And yeah, it's at a higher frame rate. Duh. We know this. Borderlands 4, 30 FPS, right? We know this. Star Wars Outlaws, 30 FPS. We get it. These big, ambitious, graphically intensive third-party games are all going to be 30 FPS and all look a little worse on Switch 2. But that doesn't matter. I've said that the whole time heading into Switch 2 generation that the games just had to, 1, play at a consistent frame rate, and 2, be good enough visually. Star Wars Outlaws is good enough visually. I played Elden Ring. It's good enough visually. I played Borderlands 4. Good enough visually. And now that we've seen Resident Evil Requiem, I've actually played it, but I haven't played the Switch 2 version. It looks good enough visually, especially compared to looking at my direct memory of actually playing Requiem. I was about to say footage, but then I remembered if I recorded footage, Capcom would probably never talk to me again because they were very adamant. No cell phones out, no footage, no images, no screenshots, no pictures. So yeah, I don't actually have footage of it, but I have a very vivid memory of the demo I played. And yeah, this does look slightly worse, especially the hair. That's really the thing that stands out the most. But gameplay wise and most of the visuals, yeah, it's way more than good enough. Let alone that we're getting Resident Evil 7 and 8 as well, natively on the system, unlike the streamed versions that were on Switch 2. Then we get the announcement after the Direct that all the Final Fantasy 7 things are coming to Switch 2. We kind of already knew that was the case, but they never officially said the words out loud, even the one that's not announced yet. It's coming. That's exciting. That means they know Switch 2 can run this thing, which of course they do because they're already working on Rebirth. They just told you that. You think Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate coming in January means they haven't already dabbled with Rebirth? Of course they have. It's coming. I have to say this. In the Direct, we had 4 brand new games announced with Nintendo IP that we did not know before the Direct. In addition, we had updates on 5 other games featuring Nintendo IP that we didn't have before Switch 2 existed. Then, on top of that, we had all the great third-party games. I have to say that Switch 2, while it might not have the 3D Mario yet, or the 3D Zelda, or the Animal Crossing, or the Smash Bros, or the big tent-pole games that people tend to buy systems for, besides Legends EA, although that's also on Switch 1, I have to say, these are really good. And I think people are going to be very satisfied. Think about it. None of the tentpole games, they're going to have a game up for Game of the Year. Switch 2 is doing great. Let's just be frank here. You can follow the week-to-week stuff and try to make all these excuses why Switch 2 isn't doing well, but it actually is. And this gets around to maybe the number one controversy coming out of, well, there's 2 controversies coming out of the Direct. Number one is some price points. I think some of the pricing is interesting. $50 for Kirby Air Riders Amiibo, I think, is a little insane. Obviously, we know the other Amiibo is expensive as well, although no one should be surprised. They already raised the price of Amiibo already this generation. So I kind of think the ones below 50, kind of par for the course. So we've already had that conversation. The $50 ones, I know that there's some additional functionality, and I don't know. They kind of just ensured I'm not going to pick up those Amiibo. That's my personal choice. I don't really use Amiibo that much anyways. I just buy them for collector's reasons. So I just don't feel like I'm going to spend $100. And there's supposedly more Amiibo coming for that game. So another 50, another $200 on that Amiibo. Went, whatever. I'll buy the game. But I'm good on the Amiibo. It's just a little too pricey for me. If this was maybe like $20 cheaper, $30, I'd maybe consider, but even then, I'm not that big. Like, I love Kirby, but I'm not a mega fan. So I don't need to have everything. The only amiibo that can probably get away with these price points for my wallet would be like maybe the Zelda amiibo. And they have to be some pretty fantastic Zelda ones, which, look, yeah, sometimes they are pretty fantastic. Okay, so price points are bothering people a little bit again. And the other thing is Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is a Switch 1 game. I think people forget this at times, that this is 100% a Switch 1 game. Just like Breath of the Wild on Nintendo Switch at launch was a Wii U game. Now, people didn't care because nobody owned Wii U, but it was a Wii U game. And people also didn't care that it didn't visually look superior than the Wii U version because, well, we were impressed with the novelty of Switch. The Switch being a hybrid home console, handheld. People didn't even own Wii U, so like people didn't even realize that it didn't really look any better than the Wii U version. In fact, many people didn't even know the Wii U version ran better at launch than the Switch version. So the Switch at launch kind of felt like a downgrade if you owned a Wii U, just from a processing perspective. It's not, but that was an optimization quirk. Now, we get to this point where everyone, I like not literally everyone, there's 9 billion people in the world, but everyone owned a Switch, or at least played on a Switch, or at least touched a Switch at some point the last 8 years. So when you get to Switch 2, sometimes the novelty of you're playing the handheld, the hybrid, the home console, no longer feels like an excuse for games to not look visually superior than the prior generation. But what was one consistent complaint for the last 8 years? What was one of the things that made us feel like we really needed a new Switch, a new generation, or even a Switch Pro, but really a new generation? Resolution, frame rate. A lot of games on Nintendo Switch ran at really low resolutions. Even Nintendo's own games. A lot of games were running at very inconsistent frame rates. Even Nintendo's own games that they couldn't even get to 60 FPS, running at 30 FPS, and not even being able to stay there. Tears of the Kingdom, a Game of the Year contender just 2 years ago, literally how it dips down into the teens at times for its frame rate, especially at launch. That is, for most people, unacceptable. For me, it was still playable, and I still really loved the game, and it became my favorite game of all time. So that kind of stuff is what made us feel like we really needed a new system. Switch 2 comes along, and now we're getting 4K, 60 FPS. 60 FPS is starting to feel standard with Nintendo's games again. Hey, we're getting 120 FPS in some cases with Nintendo's games. And that includes Metroid Prime 4. So Metroid Prime 4 is a Switch 1 game. It's always been a Switch 1 game. It was announced in 2017. Yeah, they rebooted it, I think, in 2019 for a new developer to go to Retro Studios. But the point is that, yeah, it is indeed a Switch 1 game. And people saw the open world segment they showed of the game with the motorcycle, and they go, well, you know, that desert area doesn't look very good. They kind of ignore that the end of the trailer goes to an interior section that looks massively visually superior than that desert area. Now, we can't talk about that. We have to focus on the open world section, which, yes, looks worse. And I gotta say, I was actually impressed. And I want to tell you why. Metroid Prime 4 Beyond runs at a silky smooth locked 60 FPS on Switch 1. I can't think of a single open world 3D game on Nintendo Switch 1 that looks anywhere remotely as good as that section and plays at 60 FPS. In fact, I can't even think of an open world 3D video game on Switch 1 that even runs at 60 FPS. Retro Studios has always emphasized silky smooth 60 FPS gameplay over visuals. And I get it. We got Metroid Prime Remaster, and you're like, oh, my mind is blown. This might be the best looking game on Switch, and it's 60 FPS. Guys, it's an old game coming back with fresh coats of paint, a few new lighting stuff, but it's still the original code base. It's still just not new. right? It's easy to make old games feel really pretty. But when you're doing something new and fresh, and guess what? Metroid Prime isn't open world. Yeah, the visuals are going to have to be pared back. Now, this is fine on Switch 1. In fact, I don't see a lot of people complaining that the visuals are what they are for a Switch 1 game. They're complaining because you pay $10 more on Switch 2, and all you get differently is 4K at 60 FPS or 1440p or 1080p in handheld, 120 FPS. There's no new content. There's no additional graphics or like visual things going on. It's literally the Switch 1 version, crystal clear, higher frame rates. That's it. That is all that's different between the two versions of a game that I have to tell you hasn't come out. All other Switch 2 edition games, until obviously Legends EA, have been games that previously came out. So when you were bringing them back and charging more, you had to give more reasons than just frame rate and resolution. Even the Zelda games, where that's basically mostly what you get some additional story and stuff through a phone app. I don't think that that's a replacement for real content in the game, but it is something, and it does work, and it actually functions surprisingly well, better than I thought it was going to. Enough that I've at least dabbled with it. I do think that we have hit this point where we are expecting the world from a platform that's $450 and runs at 15 watts in your hand, runs off battery. I can't think of any games that come remotely close to 120 FPS on any other hybrid handheld out there. Think about open world 3D games. Think about the Steam Deck. Think about even the recently announced, Legion Go 2 or whatever that's like over $1,000. The new Xbox handheld coming out that's like $1,000. None of those are purporting full 3D modern day games at anywhere near 120 FPS. Because it's very taxing to run things at such a high frame rate. So I have to kind of reverse this a bit and ask you, I'm not saying the $10 more makes it worth it for you. If it's not, buy the Switch 1 version. They're not making you buy the Switch 2 version, and the Switch 1 version runs on Switch 2. So you don't have to get the Switch 2 version. But it's a Switch 1 game. They weren't developing this game for Switch 2. In fact, I would argue it's never really been in development for Switch 2. They, according to reports, were still fundamentally working on core aspects of this game this year. That doesn't mean the Switch 1 version was done 2 years ago and they spent the last 2 years trying to make the Switch 2 version. No. It means the main game was still being developed this year. So when the hell were they supposed to have time to make a Switch 2 version that has massive visual improvements? Remember, it's a day and date release. This isn't a Switch 2 version of an older game. They're not delaying the game another couple of years just to make it look a little prettier on Switch 2. That would be dumb. That would be silly. Why do that? Would you rather they only release a Switch 1 version this holiday, even though Switch 2 is their new thing, and not give you 4K, not give you 120 FPS? Is that what you want? Because that's one option. The other option is the whole game's delayed another 2 years, and they put another $15 to $20 million into the pot of development on it to maybe not even make that back with the sales. Metroid Prime 4 is not a tentpole seller for Nintendo. It does side-scrolling Kirby numbers, even the 3D games. This actually, especially because the best-selling game in franchise history is at 3 million, and that was a side-scrolling Metroid Dread. The last 3D game came out on a platform that had over 100 million install base. It sold 1.36 million, and Nintendo called it a disappointment. So much so, we didn't get a truly brand new Metroid game for 11 years. They put it on the shelf. Oh, we had Federation Force, a little side dish. Oh, we had Samus Returns bringing an old game back on 3DS. What we didn't have was a brand new mainline game for 11 years. They didn't even announce one. for 7 years. And when they announced it, it was only just beginning development. They factually put Metroid on the shelf because of the bad sales of Other M. I've seen some arguments that Metroid Prime 4 should have just been a Switch 2 only game. A game that was still in active development on core aspects of the franchise, or core aspects of the game anyways, this year. But they should have flipped the switch and made it a Switch 2 game only, which again would have delayed the game even longer. Also would have left behind the promise you made to Switch 1 gamers in 2017 that this game was coming to Switch 1. Alienating your potential audience, forcing them to have to buy a new system to play something that you told them they would get on that system. All to put more money into a game that you can't guarantee sells enough to justify it. Before Metroid Prime 4, Other M was the most expensive Metroid game ever made. And according to Nintendo, was disappointing, underwhelming, didn't sell enough. They probably lost money. Metroid Prime 4 is made by a Western AAA studio, and it got rebooted after a couple years of development somewhere else. This is probably by far and away the most expensive Metroid game ever made. The amount of money Nintendo has sunk into getting this game made is probably astronomical. Might even be more than they're sinking into the next 3D Mario game. Maybe the only franchise Nintendo has that probably has a bigger budget than Metroid Prime 4 is the next 3D Zelda game. For a franchise that's never sold more than 3 million. For a franchise that when they remastered Metroid Prime, it also only sold 1.36 million. At least officially. We have no updates since then. So they should put more money in? Put more pressure? If Metroid Prime 4 doesn't sell well, and I don't know what well means for Nintendo, I'm assuming more than 3 million. Don't know where they need to get. I don't know if it's 5 million to make it profitable or break even. I don't know. Only Nintendo knows the real numbers. There's a real risk that if this game shot out the gate, let's say they flipped the switch 3 years ago and started making it exclusively for Switch 2 to launch at the same time we're getting now, and it looks visually more impressive, but the install base is at 10 million? Do you really think Metroid would sell enough? Do you think they would reach 50% of the Switch 2's audience? And I say 50% because the history of Metroid is that it's not evergreen. That 95% of all game sales for Metroid happened in launch month. That was true for the best-selling Metroid. She was even higher than 95%. Metroid's never been evergreen. And even if you want this game to be evergreen, it's never proven it can be. There's a massive risk doing this any other way than what they're doing right now. So yeah, maybe you can argue they should sell both versions for the same price. I can listen. $70 is the new standard as of Switch 2, but I hear you. And maybe I don't even buy the Switch 2 edition. Maybe I stick with the Switch 1. I don't know. Or maybe I buy the Switch 2 edition because it's also the Switch 1 edition. Like, I could put it in an OG Switch and play it, or I could put it on Switch 2 and get the enhancements. I don't know. Haven't made my mind up. I've made my mind I'm probably going to buy it. I think it looks incredible. I think the gameplay is getting like no talk here. The epic motorcycle battle against 6-7 enemies on screen at once, and they're different enemy types doing different things, making you use your bike in different ways while also shooting your arm cannon. Then you hop off that thing, get into a corridor battle, and all of a sudden it opens into this zone, this corridor that just looks amazing, and all of it to 60 FPS or 120 if you turn that on Switch 2. I'm excited, man. I'm hyped. Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is maybe my most anticipated game outside of Zelda. I'm looking forward more to this than I am in a 3D Mario game. I'm looking extremely forward to the new Fire Emblem, the new Mario Tennis. Hell, after playing Legends EA, I'm even looking forward to that. We have a packed slate of games for the first 4 to 6 months next year. Oh, and they gave us Mario Galaxy 2 again. And I say again, because we only ever got it once. So the second time. So again, the first time was original release. I'm going to sit back and say, I understand. If this was not the Direct for you, if you are not happy with it, I get it. A lot of people, when they buy consoles, only buy them for a handful of games. Most people are not me. I'll probably own a couple hundred games throughout, maybe more, actually, depends, throughout the Switch 2's life, right? Not everyone's me. I enjoy a wide breadth of franchises, a wide breadth of games, and I'm always open to introducing myself to new ones I've never tried before. But not everyone is that way. Some people only play one game a year. Some people only buy 5 per generation. If you bought a Switch 2 and you're not satisfied because they haven't announced the games that you want, why did you buy a Switch 2? You shouldn't be buying something before you can already justify it. I've said this before the system came out. Don't buy a Switch 2 unless what's already coming out on it day one, plus the Switch 1 improvements, justifies the purchase. If you're still looking for justification of something you bought, look in the mirror. Wait till the games are here, then buy it. Hell, go sell the system. Don't worry about buying another one until the games you want are actually here. Now, this is why I'm excited. You see, all these amazing games are coming because, yes, the Switch 2 has games. This isn't something that we could always say for other generations on other platforms that launched in their first year. Switch 2 does not have a game problem. It's getting a ton of them. Exclusive games, old games coming back, big name third parties, day and date. Some of the best third parties over the last couple of years coming over. Yeah, Nintendo Switch 2 has games. And we haven't even got to the big ones yet. That's what's so exciting. Next year, the year after, and the year after that, the next 3 years of Nintendo Switch 2 is bound to be where Nintendo brings out the big guns. Why? Because they do it every generation. We know Mario's coming. We know Zelda's coming. We know Animal Crossing is coming. We know Smash Bros. Is coming. Wii U got Smash Bros. We know these games are coming. I know it's hard to be patient. But in the meanwhile, Nintendo keeps giving me more games I want to play, so I can't help but be excited. I already felt justified day one. Because now my Switch games, my lovely Switch games, finally feel amazing again. And then in Mario Kart World and DK Bonanza and Cyberpunk and Yakuza 0, all made me happy. And no, I'm not happy with every release. I don't think Madden is good. I'm sorry. I play Madden. I'm playing on an Xbox because I don't think the Switch 2 version is acceptable for me. For me. Might be for you, but it's not for me. I don't like some of the prices. $50 amiibo. Yikes. Not really sure on the $100 Virtual Boy accessory, but they gave us a $25 one if you don't want to buy the $100 one. I'm also not really sure I care about the Virtual Boy all that much to begin with, outside of collector's reasons. But man, that Direct was amazing for me. I gave it an A-. I've said this many times. The minus just being, yeah, it lacked that one game that I think would have impressed everyone. And yeah, I don't like DLC being announced before a game comes out. Those feel like minor gripes considering how much I'm getting and how happy I am with my purchase. I know I'm going to be called a fanboy. I know I'm going to be called a shill. I know I'm going to be called a corporate defender. I just want to be very clear as I wrap this video out. I don't care about Nintendo, the company. Not the first time I've said this. I've said this many times. People think because some of the things they do don't bother me as much as it bothers others, that I'm a corporate shill. Don't give a crap about them as a company. I give a crap about their games because that's the only reason I'm here. I play games on other platforms, play games on Xbox. I'm actually playing games on PC. Literally today, I played some on PC. I play games on other platforms. But, it's a pretty big but. Nintendo makes games that I tend to enjoy a little bit more than the rest. And everything they showed me new in that the 4 new games looked incredible, man. They just did. Age of Imprisonment, one of the games we already knew was coming, looks better than ever. These games have me excited. I feel like a kid in a candy store that can't decide what I'm going to play first. But people want me to bitch and complain and whine because we did get 3D Mario and Metroid Prime 4 wasn't as visually pleasing as you expected. And oh my gosh, the motorcycle. Why is she riding a motorcycle? Because she's a fucking badass. That's why. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I am Nathaniel Rubblegents from Nintendo Prime. Let me know what you think about all this down in the comments below.